Over the centuries, Joan of Arc has been immortalized in art, film, literature, and more. Even if you aren't a history nerd like me, you probably know some of her story. One of my favorite depictions of her is done by French sculpturist François Rude, done in 1852. Rude's sculptures often depict French heroes, showing off French pride and nationalism. I find this reasoning behind his sculpture somewhat humorous, however, because when I came across it, I was not reminded of French pride. Instead, I was reminded of Joan's power and strength as a woman in a time where her society would not have accepted her as a full citizen. I also was inspired by her faith and the fact that she held on to her belief of her visions even as she was burned at the stake. Even within the same depiction of her, the nuances of the interpretations of Joan of Arc is shown. But with this, I think the question arises, which one of us is correct in our interpretation of Joan? Who was the real Joan, and can that image be separated from the iconic symbol she has become? Before I get into some of those bigger questions on her, I'm going to go over some basic information on who Joan was. At the age of 13, Joan began hearing the voices of St. Michael, St. Catherine, and St. Margaret. They told her that it was Joan's mission to help Charles VII ascend to the French throne. Joan lived during the time of the 100 Years' War. This war between England and France had led to the English king becoming king of both England and France. It was Joan's job to restore the French throne to the proper authority. Joan's story as a hero began at the age of 16 when she set off from her village to help Charles VII. Before she could talk directly to Charles, a 3-week examination was required to prove her purity and orthodoxy. After they talked, they went to Orleans, where the city was under siege by the English. The French, with the help of Joan as a leader and strategist, kicked the English out of Orleans. It took only 2 weeks from the time that Joan arrived for the English to retreat. From there, Joan, with a group of others, took Charles to Reims to crown him as King of France. The crowning of Charles, however, did not stop the war, and less than a year later, in May 1430, Joan was captured by the English. For the last year of her life, Joan was in jail and on trial from the English as they tried to find a way to prove her a heretic to get rid of their political enemy. Sadly, she was found guilty of heresy, and on May 30th, 1431, at the age of 19, she was burned at the stake. The events of Joan's life are remarkable and arguably miraculous. The complex political events, mixed with her fierce personality, has made her story, and thus in a way herself, outlive those who condemned her to be burned at the stake. But all of this background leads back to my initial question: who was the real Joan, and can that image be separated from the iconic symbol she is today? One example that symbolizes how the real and iconic versions of Joan are different is the fact that Joan herself was illiterate. This means that everything that we have written about what Joan said was written by someone else. Not only do we have this barrier, but some of her words were written or rewritten by the English, who were her enemy. In either case, it is very easy for Joan's words to have been changed to support their own personal agendas. An example of this is seen in a letter written to the English from Joan in 1429. In it, Joan says, "For I have been sent here by God, King of Heaven, to chase you completely out of France, body for body if necessary." But during her trial on February 22nd, Joan claims that she never said body for body in her original correspondence. Even the contemporary documentation of Joan's words were changed to fit the agendas of those around her. Within her own lifetime, Joan had already, in a way, lost hold of her own identity. This loss of identity was not always done with malicious intent, however. Within Joan's lifetime, a poem about her was written by French female poet and author Christine de Pizan. In the poem, de Pizan praises Joan for all of her efforts. But, as scholar Christine McWebb has pointed out, most of this kind of praise of Joan is not towards her specifically, but towards women in general. De Pizan uses Joan as an avenue to progress her own work and prove the worth of women in general, more than just pointing out Joan's worth specifically. With these two examples in mind, we can better understand why nearly 600 years since her death, we still have so many versions and questions about who Joan of Arc truly was. All of the media I spoke about earlier is an easy way to see how there is a continuing discussion of who Joan truly was and who she is today. But even with all this, I still haven't quite answered my question of who Joan of Arc really was. And I'm sorry to say I don't plan on answering that question today. I think the ambiguity of who Joan was is part of her power today. Yes, you can go read all the primary documents you want from her day and try and piece together the pieces of who she really was. However, I think obsessing over trying to find the true Joan of Arc takes away the symbol of who she has become today. In our world, we are so obsessed with being right about everything. I think we can miss out on history's beautiful mess. Being okay with the fact that even with an intense study of Joan of Arc, finding the true her is impossible can be powerful and help us better understand not only the Middle Ages, but our world today. So in a way, me, a Christian feminist college undergrad, and Rude, a French sculpture nationalist, can both be right about Joan and both be wrong at the same time. And I think the fact that those can both be true is part of the reason why a peasant girl from the 1400s is still relevant today.